हेलो फ्रेंड्स, कैसे हैं आप? वेल, इमेजिन एक क्लास जहां इवन इफ द टीचर कम्स, नो वन केयर्स. Someone is cooking Maggie in class, तो someone else is playing the guitar. When the responsibility of this class is given to someone who is more used to handling a rifle than chalk, what could happen? Today's story is about an ex-military officer who uses military tactics to discipline students. Let's see if the school remains a school or becomes a training camp when the rowdiest class falls into the hands of a commander. So skipping the unnecessary intro, let's get started. And throughout the story, as always, I am Movie Man with you. Oh yes, the name of our story today is Big Brother. At the beginning of the story, we see Henry. He used to be a US military officer, but now he has retired because he wants to spend the rest of his life as a teacher. And to become a teacher, he chose his own childhood school. He studied at this school in his childhood, and out of love for the school, he goes to his old school. But the current principal there tells him, "You have no teaching experience, so you cannot be given this job." But Henry then shows him a letter signed by his higher authorities. And seeing this, the principal immediately agrees to give him the job and tells him, "You have to teach the worst class in the school, which no teacher in the school can teach, because all the kids in that class are very naughty. They listen less to the teacher and talk back more." The principal was actually talking about Section D here, but Henry just smiles upon hearing his words and leaves. And finally, Henry got the job. Next, we see Henry going to their class the next day to teach those naughty kids. But here, no student pays him any attention even after seeing him. They act as if no one has entered their class, and everyone is busy with their own useless activities. Someone is sleeping in class, while someone is playing the guitar to impress girls, and some are even lighting a stove and making Maggie there. It's such a situation it's hard to tell if it's a school or a picnic camp. And poor Henry has no respect at all. After trying for a while and failing to get anyone's attention, he quickly came up with an idea. He thought, so what if they don't focus on me? I'll just blend in with them. So Henry starts commenting on everyone's activities to draw those kids' attention to himself. He goes to the boy making Maggie noodles and says, "Hey, is this how you cook Maggie? Learn from me. I can cook well." Then he goes to a boy playing Free Fire and says, "You're just a kid. Try beating me someday if you can. I'm a Season 3 player in this game." In this way, he goes to all the kids one by one and starts commenting on their work. Then when all the kids look at him, he introduces himself and starts writing his name and phone number on the board. But seeing his handwriting, the kids start laughing again. They ask him, "How will you be a teacher with such bad handwriting?" Meanwhile, a student in the class calls the number he wrote on the board. When Henry answers the phone, the student quietly says, "You get out of here." Meanwhile, when Henry immediately turns around, he sees everyone has their phones out and held to their ears, meaning there's no way to understand who called. You understand, it's not like there are one or two mischievous kids in the class. The whole class is mischievous. But Henry takes this jokingly and laughs. So now those naughty kids go back to their useless activities, the ones they were doing before. They start ignoring Henry again, meaning it's as if they don't even know there's a teacher in the class. Seeing this, Henry takes a piece of chalk and uses a rubber band to shoot it at the class fire sprinkler. He's a military man, so the aim hits 100 out of 100. As soon as the fire sprinkler opens, water starts spraying everywhere. This gets all the kids wet. They become like wet chickens basically. Then when all the kids were looking at Henry, they were thinking this is a dangerous teacher. And just then Henry puts an umbrella over his head and tells everyone, "Forget what you've done so far. Consider that your dad has arrived." I don't praise myself, but I also can't help it. In the next scene, we see a group of backbenchers going to the sports room and smoking cigarettes. And their group leader, Jack, was also there. He had a crush on a girl from a class senior to him. Most boys I've seen have their first crush on seniors. Anyway, Jack also had a crush on the sweet girl. So he was looking at that girl's photo on his phone. A friend of his sees this from the side and swiftly takes the phone from his hand. Taking the phone, he starts teasing him, just like our brothers and friends do when we fall in love newly. Just then a group of spoiled basketball players with rich fathers comes there. Jack's group already had enmity with this group. They can't stand each other. The boys in the basketball group used to treat people however they wanted because of their father's money. But when they behaved badly with Jack, Jack didn't let them off either too. The matter eventually turns into a physical fight between the two. Then we see the basketball players group practicing. Jack was playing basketball with his friends then. At that time, to take revenge for his insult, Jack throws a bottle on the ground so that the basketball team leader falls. It works according to their plan too. The basketball team leader slips on that bottle and falls on the floor. And seeing this, Jack and his friends start laughing from above. But while doing this, their English ma'am sees them. English ma'ams are always cuties. But although our English ma'am looked cute, she was very strict about discipline. So she gives them punishment. To escape punishment, those students play a prank on the teacher. They leave the lid of the flask on her table open. And with a slight shake, all her tea spills onto important documents. And after ruining ma'am's day like this, they flee from there. In the next scene, we see the school principal. He is very very worried because his school's reputation is not good, for which reason the education board is talking about cutting 20% from their annual funding. So some people from the education board have also come to the school because they wanted to know if the school is running properly and how the principal sir uses the school funding. Meanwhile, our new teacher Henry goes to teach the kids in his class, but all the students in the class together had placed a water bucket on top of the door to prank him, so that as soon as the door opens, the bucket falls on his head and he gets completely soaked. And everything was going according to the kids' plan. But when Henry opens the door, he punches that falling bucket. And seeing such reflexes from a mere class teacher, the kids are totally surprised. Actually, they didn't know that Henry is actually a former commando. And Henry then says with a bit of attitude, no, don't mess with that. Anyway, then Henry enters the classroom to teach the kids. And he goes straight to Jack and asks him for a packet of cigarettes, because seeing him, he understood that cigarettes would surely be found with him. Actually, a fun smokes, it is easily understood, because fair people's lips turn completely black. So then Jack gives him that cigarette packet. Jack was actually thinking in his mind, what does Henry want to do? Now Henry takes a cigarette out of the packet and asks them all, if anyone can name 3 ingredients of this cigarette, I will give him the opportunity to leave the class today.
Meaning he won't have to attend my class. And getting such an opportunity to skip class, the kids jump with joy. One of them raises his hand and names those 3 ingredients. And with this, Henry gives him the chance to leave the class. He leaves the class dancing and playing the guitar. And seeing this, the rest of the students are stunned. Everyone starts listening to Henry's words very carefully so that they too get a chance to skip class. Then, Henry places a cigarette in front of those students and asks them, what happens if you smoke? He knew very well that if he just stated the harms of cigarettes, they would never listen to his words. He then tells them that smoking causes nasty nicotine to accumulate in our lungs, and along with that, there is tar due to burning paper, and these two combined perforate our lungs. Even cancer can occur. The surprising thing was that this was the first time all the kids in the class were listening to him intently and showing interest in studying. Then, after the bell rang, Henry asked those kids to return their cigarettes. And unwillingly, Jack and his companions have to return the cigarettes. The situation stood such that the snake died but the stick didn't break. The harmful aspects of cigarettes were taught, and technically the cigarettes were also confiscated from them. Then that day in the cafeteria, the basketball player's captain trips and knocks down one of Jack's friends, Bruce. Then what? A huge fight starts between these two groups. They keep throwing chairs, tables, everything at each other. One of the main weapons of the fight was the pizza of that restaurant. Even the burgers were not spared. Beating each other, they made it bloody like sauce. As a result, those 5 kids from Henry's class were temporarily suspended, because the school authority held those 5 kids responsible for starting the fight. Meaning, might is right. The 5 kids of Jack's group are poor, so they are the ones standing in the dock of the accused. Then, when Henry comes out of the principal's office, he sees Jack fighting with those boys again. Henry quickly goes and stops them and tells Jack to stay calm. But Jack then gets angry and says, actually, it's nobody's fault. The fault lies with the school, because they don't even see the wrongdoings of rich kids. Education has been sold for money here. Getting justice there is so unrealistic. Since Henry was a military man, he wanted to deal with the matter with a cool head. So he wanted to see all the students' biodata. So after school, Henry starts going through the files of those 5 students. And there he learns a lot more about them. And among them, he first picks up Jaffar's file. Jafar is basically a boy of Pakistani origin. And we know that Muslims are not looked upon very favorably in Western countries. Being a Muslim, he was discriminated against in everything there. Even his neighbors accused him of theft many times. They even filed police cases. But Jafar bore all this silently. And he used to express this social discrimination through his music. He tried to forget his pain through music. His dream was to become a big musician one day. Then, secondly, Henry picks up Dan and Kyle, whose father hasn't loved her since childhood, because they always wanted a male child. They were very dissatisfied with having a girl child. How strange, right? This bigotry remains even among people in developed countries of the world. Yet people forget that a daughter is a blessing from the Creator. And just because she was a girl, they hated Danon. Then, when Danon's brother was born, they were so obsessed with the little brother that they didn't even have time to look at Danon. And little Danon then tried to catch everyone's eye. At such a young age, she started thinking that being born as a girl was perhaps a curse. For which, as she grew up a bit, she started playing games like boys, and even wearing clothes like boys. She even cut her hair like boys, so that her father would love her at least a little. But doing all this didn't help. And gradually Danon started feeling that no matter what she did, her father would only hate her. Seeing all this, at one point hatred towards her family also started growing inside her. Then, Henry takes the files of 2 brothers, named Bruce and Chris. Their mother ran away with someone else in their childhood, because of which Bruce's father drank a lot of alcohol. He loved his wife so much that unable to bear the pain, he eventually became stone-hearted with grief. He couldn't pay attention to work either, and Bruce drowned himself in the addiction of video games to escape this mental agony. That's why Chris had to take care of Bruce and his father. He worked at a small grocery store to run the household expenses. Growing up seeing poverty, at one point both of them developed an apathy towards life. Then, when Henry sees Jack's file, he doesn't find much information about Jack there.
And this was a bit shocking for Henry too. Even though he could find out about everyone, he couldn't know much about Jack. Then, on screen we see Jack. He is working as a waiter in a hotel. And just then a gambler comes there. This man's name is Jenin. He has come here to party with his business partner. And Jack was serving at their table. And while serving, he sees a fancy lighter of Jenin's on the table. A new smoker after all. So he couldn't control his greed seeing the expensive lighter. Seizing the opportunity, he swipes the lighter kept on the table. And keeps saying to himself, I am the Romeo who steals mascara from under the eyes. And this is just a lighter. But the very next moment our trickster gets caught. And Jenin's men beat him like a dog. At one stage of the beating, when they see his ID card from his wallet, they realize he's actually a student. Young age, did the deed out of emotion. So after seeing this, Jenin gives him some money. And also offers him a job delivering food. On the other hand, we see Henry. He goes to Jeffers' house to meet him. But upon arriving here, he sees the father and son running away after stealing something. And many people are running after them. Seeing the bad situation, Henry stops everyone with a sword lying in front. And by sweet-talking them, he somehow saves Jeffer and takes him away from there. Henry had already read Jeffer's file and knew everything, that he likes music, so he had already set up a music arrangement. Henry then takes Jeffer to a bridge, and there, according to Henry's plan, a roadside band was performing. Henry gives Jeffer a chance to play with them. Even to boost Jeffer's confidence, he starts performing with the band himself. Seeing this, Jeffer also gains confidence to play music, meaning when a teacher becomes like a friend, the student can accept his education with joy. And this incident is the real embodiment of that. Jeffer then continues to perform with an open heart. He becomes very happy, because until today he had never performed in front of so many people. Then, we see Bruce and Chris on the screen. Their father wants to drink alcohol from them in the middle of the night. He gives them money and says, go right now, bring alcohol for me. But they don't keep their father's request. And at this, their father gets angry and kicks them out of the house. The next day, Henry goes to meet their father. Henry explains to him that he should be responsible towards his own sons. Even in the conversation, Henry advises him to go to an alcohol rehab center. On the other hand, Dannon's father buys makeup for her. He tells Dannon, you should stay like a girl, because we don't want you to behave like boys. But hearing this, Dannon gets angry, because her father never takes care of her. After so long, suddenly today he realized that she is a girl, not a boy. But why did he not look at her at all for so long? And from that resentment, a sky-high anger was born in her mind. She also feels that her father always wants to show her that she is not a good girl. Dannon smears all that makeup on her brother's face, and she turns the little brother into a complete joker. Although it didn't look bad. What do you say, friends? Anyway, then Dannon takes the car keys and leaves. While driving, Dannon runs into Henry. Henry stops her and says, driving without a license is illegal. If you really want to drive, then come with me. Then, both of them go for go-kart racing. Henry surprises Dannon there and says, hey, look behind. Actually, Henry had called Dannon's father here too, because he wanted a race between father and daughter. And when the race started, father and daughter didn't care about each other at all. To win the race, they didn't seem to hesitate to push each other off. While driving so carelessly, both of them went off the designated racing track. And right there a truck runs over Dannon's go-kart. But Dannon had jumped out of the car before that and survived. Seeing this scene, Dannon's father starts crying. Although he didn't know Dannon was alive, he thought Dannon might have been crushed under the truck. Seeing her father's tears, Dannon realizes how much her father loves her, but he never expressed it. And so seeing her father's love, Dannon also cries. And after so many years, perhaps for the first time, she hugs her father in joy and cries. Henry did a noble deed here. He ended the long-standing resentment between father and daughter. Actually, the depth of a relationship cannot be felt without facing danger.
The next day, we see some kids in school are given a project, and that was to interview a person recovering from alcohol. And Bruce and Chris were also in that group. They come to a rehab center, but coming here, they are completely shocked, because the person they came to interview here is none other than their own father. The students start asking him various questions. Why did he start drinking? In answer, he says, I loved my wife very much, but during the most difficult time of my life, she ran away with someone else. That's why I started drinking alcohol. Then someone asks him, then how did the thought of quitting alcohol come? He says, I forgot that I also have 2 children, whose care is my responsibility. He doesn't directly introduce Jack and Bruce as his sons in front of everyone. However, he asks for their forgiveness. He says, I am truly very remorseful. Hearing these words, both Chris and Bruce start crying. After so many years, they learned the real truth of their father's heart. On the other hand, we see Jack has started working with Jenin. Jenin has a fighting ring where many fighters fight, and many spectators come here and bet on the fighters. Jenin tells Jack to mix drugs in a fighter's water to win the next fight. In return, he will give him a lot of money. Jack was not agreed at first, but Jenin forces him to do this work because he had bet a lot of money on his own fighter losing, meaning if his fighter loses, he will get a lot of money from the opponent. Finally, Jack agrees and pours drugs into that fighter's water before the fight. But he gets caught here too. What a situation! Can't do any theft properly, gets caught again and again. Anyway, this time it didn't end with just getting caught. The people there started beating him up badly. They even beat him and locked him in a locker. After a while, Henry comes there looking for him and asks them if they have seen any student. Then one of them tells Henry, "Hey, teacher, go back where you came from." But just then Jack starts screaming, "Help, help," from the locker. Henry realizes that these people have kept Jack trapped, so without further words, he starts thrashing them soundly. Actually, they are a bit hot-headed, so it won't be possible to stop them with words. Understanding this, without wasting time, he starts fighting them and single-handedly beats them all to a pulp. At one point, he fights their best fighter and knocks him out too, who was supposed to fight a little later. The guy goes from standing straight to lying flat. Since the best fighter is out, the others get scared. Then taking Jack along, Henry goes to the hospital. When Henry was applying bandages to his wounds, Jack tries to tell the police the whole truth, but Jenin comes and stops him. If everything gets out, Jenin's fighting business will go bust. That's why he offers them a lot of money. But this time, Jack returns his money. Meanwhile, this news spreads to every TV channel. Henry's praise is on everyone's lips. Henry beat a professional MMA fighter to save a school student. And after this news, he becomes famous in the whole school, and all the students start obeying him. Everyone now stands up to respect him. Then we are taken straight to a flashback, meaning Henry's school life. When Henry studied in school, he was also naughty. One day at a school function, a classmate of his was playing the piano, but naughty Henry throws a water-filled balloon at him. The boy was playing the piano very attentively, but because of scaring him like that, he gets terribly frightened, and his whole program gets ruined. Because of this, the boy fights with Henry. Although Henry has been an expert in fighting since childhood, at one stage of the fight, a stone statue falls on the boy's hand and breaks his finger. For this reason, Henry was suspended from school, and his family didn't want to keep him in the country anymore, so he had to go to the USA. After becoming a teacher, maybe everyone forgets that he was also a student once, but our Henry didn't forget that, and maybe that's why he was organizing this special class in his own way. We see the present Henry again. His class now has 100% attendance. Final exams are ahead, but everyone except Bruce was working very hard on their studies. Bruce couldn't focus on his studies because he had a habit of taking drugs. We learn that just as Jack was taking the help of video games to escape family responsibilities, similarly, Bruce started taking drugs due to family pressure, and this later turned into his addiction. For this reason, he couldn't focus on his studies and couldn't get good results in mock tests either. But no one ever understood this issue of his. Realizing his condition, Henry tells him, "Don't worry, I am by your side." But Bruce's condition keeps getting worse with time. At one point, unable to control his emotions and frustrated with himself, he jumps from the balcony. Everyone rescues him and takes him to the hospital. After going there, it is known that he has gone into a coma. Then some yellow journalists of the media blame Bruce's school and Henry for this incident. They propagate this as mental pressure in the name of education, and for this reason, Henry is summoned by the education board. They cancel his teaching license and tell Henry to leave the school. And when Henry was leaving the school accepting everything silently, many students tried to stop him because they didn't want Henry to leave them. They were hurting a lot. They came up with a plan to bring Henry back so that the education board understands that Henry didn't pressure them in studies. Everyone decides that they will get very good results in this exam and prove to the education board that Henry is a good teacher. And so from that day on, they all start preparing for their exams with double the effort. Then when the exam day comes, Jack, Bruce, and all the students of the class get a message from Henry's phone that he wants to meet them at school before the exam. But when all the students reach the school, they find out that this is all Jenin's conspiracy. He wanted to teach Henry a lesson. He keeps all the school students locked up in the school so that they cannot take the exam, and Henry can never return to the school. But after a while, Henry also arrives at the school. Actually, he also wanted to meet all the students before the exam in his mind. Then he learns everything about Jenin, that he has kept all the students captive. He quickly goes to Jenin and starts fighting with all his men. The students get released from there and quickly head towards the exam hall. On the other hand, Henry was still fighting with Jenin. During the fight, Jenin tells him, "I am that boy whose hand you broke. That is why I could never go to the music competition. Even after that day, I never played the piano, and you are responsible for all of this. And today, the entire reason for my anger is you yourself." Henry tries to explain to him, "I made a mistake in childhood. I didn't harm you thinking so much back then. Still, I apologize to you for that day. That was an accident. I didn't do anything intentionally." But without listening to any words, he attacks Henry again. At one stage of the fight, Henry was about to kill him with a knife, but just then he stops suddenly and says, "Let's not harbor hatred, let's change." Saying this, he leaves from there. On the other hand, we see all the students. They had reached the exam hall. They took the exam very well too, and for which reason a few days later in the results, it is seen that their college has secured the first position, and so 20% extra funds are given to the school from the education board. At this, the principal himself jumps with joy, and at the same time, Henry also gets permission to teach again. And in the end, we see Henry entering a rowdy class again. Just like before, he hits the fire sprinkler with chalk and soaks everyone. And with an umbrella over his head, he tells everyone, "Forget what you have done so far. Just think your daddy is here. I don't praise myself, but I can't help it either." And here our story ends. Truth be told, calling Henry just a teacher would be wrong. He was a friend, a guardian, and most importantly, he was a healer. He mended those broken hearts that society had branded as ruined. The story shows us clearly that no student is actually bad. Maybe they get a little messed up due to circumstances.
They just need a person who, instead of scolding them, will understand their inner pain and say, "Don't be afraid, I am by your side." Did you have any such Henry in your life? Let me know in the comments.